Thanks for joining me on the news. We begin with Israel. Emergency in Israel over judicial overhaul. 15 feared dead after ferry sunk in Indonesia. Russia says Ukrainian drone attack thwarted. Anxiety in Spain over election results. In Port Sudan crash, at least 9 dead. On Sunday, last-ditch efforts to reach a concession on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's judicial overhaul plan dragged late into the night as tens of thousands of protesters rallying for and against the proposal took to the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Isaac Herzog, Israel's president, called the situation an emergency as he met Netanyahu and opposition leaders, while the United States urged the Israeli parliament or Knesset not to rush the divisive changes. The vote on the draft law, which would limit the ability of Supreme Court judges to strike down government decisions they deem unreasonable, is anticipated in the Knesset on Monday. Netanyahu, who was released from hospital on Monday after an unscheduled pacemaker implant, said he was doing excellently and will participate in the vote. The bill, if passed, will be the first reform written into law of a package critics fear aims to curb judicial independence, but which Netanyahu insists is needed for balance among branches of government. As the crisis looked set to come to a head, Herzog, who has returned from a visit to the U.S., drove directly to the Sheba Medical Center for a meeting with Netanyahu late on Sunday. This is a time of emergency. An agreement must be reached, the president said in a statement issued by his office. He then met opposition leader Yair Lapid and was due to confer with another politician, Benny Gantz. His office, however, declines comment on the meetings. Now in Indonesia, no less than 15 people are dead after a ferry sank off Indonesia's Sulawesi Island, according to local authorities. Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency said on Monday the ferry had 40 passengers on board when it sank. Approximately midnight, 16 o'clock GMT, and authorities are searching for 19 people who remain missing. 6 passengers were rescued and are being treated in hospital, the agency said. It was not clear how many people were on board, as it is not uncommon in Indonesia for the actual number of passengers on a boat to differ from the manifest. The search will be conducted by dividing into 2 teams. The first team would dive around the accident site. Muhammad Arafa, head of the local search and rescue agency in Kendara City in southeast Sulawesi, said in a statement. The second team will conduct a sweep above the water surface around the accident site using a rowboat and longboat. Ferry accidents are not uncommon in Indonesia, which is the world's largest archipelago country with more than 17,000 islands. In 2018, as many as 192 people drowned when an overloaded ferry overturned and sank on Lake Toba on Sumatra Island. In May last year, a ferry with more than 800 people on board ran aground in waters off East Nusa Tenggara province. No one was hurt in the incident. Now on talking Russia-Ukraine war, Russia's air defense forces have suppressed a Ukrainian drone attack on Moscow, the Russian Defense Ministry has announced, accusing Kyiv of launching a terrorist act against the country's capital. The attack earlier on Monday came a day after Ukraine vowed to retaliate for a Russian missile attack on the Black Sea port of Odessa. The Kyiv regime attempt to carry out a terrorist act using 2 drones on objects of the territory of the city of Moscow was stopped, the Russian Defense Ministry said. 2 Ukrainian drones were suppressed and crashed. There are no casualties. There was no comment from Ukraine either. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said the drone strikes occurred at around 4 o'clock a.m. local time. According to reports, one of the drones fell on Komsomolsky Prospect, which is close to Russia's defense ministry, while another hit a business center in Likacheva Street near one of Moscow's main ring roads. 2 loud explosions before the attacks were reported. A video of the business center with some damage visible to the top of the tall building was also posted. The road around it was closed. Moscow lies around 500 kilometers, 310 miles from the Ukrainian border, but have been hit by several drone attacks this year, with one even hitting the Kremlin in May. Earlier this month, Russia said it had downed 5 Ukrainian drones that disrupted the functioning of Moscow's Vnukovo International Airport. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Russian forces have pounded the port city of Odessa since Moscow quit a deal allowing Ukrainian grain to be exported through the Black Sea last week. The latest strike on the city on Sunday killed 2 people and severely damaged a historic cathedral. Clergymen rescued icons from rubble inside the badly damaged Transfiguration Cathedral, which was demolished under Stalin in 1936 and rebuilt in the 1990s after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Ukrainian government condemned the cathedral strike as a war crime, saying it had been destroyed twice by Stalin and Putin. President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged retaliation. They will definitely feel this, he said. Now on elections, Spain appears headed for a hung parliament after national elections on Sunday left parties on the right and left without a clear path towards forging a new government. With 99% of votes counted by 11:45 p.m. on Sunday, the conservative opposition People's Party (PP) had 136 seats, while Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's ruling Socialist Workers' Party (PSOE) had 122 seats. Parties with the greatest potential to be kingmakers were nearly even, with the far-right Vox Party on 33 seats and far-left Sumar on 31. The outcome for Vox, which had campaigned on a platform of rolling back laws on gender violence, LGBTQ rights, abortion and euthanasia, marks a loss of 19 seats from 4 years earlier. While Sanchez's Socialists finished second, they and their allied parties celebrated the outcome as a victory, since their combined forces gained slightly more seats than the PP and the far-right. The bloc that could likely support Sanchez totaled 172 seats, while the right bloc behind PP's leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo was likely at 170. And there is no sign as to exactly which direction the country is headed, whether it's with the vision of Mr. Sanchez or whether it will all change under a government headed by Mr. Feijóo, she said. The closer than expected outcome for the two blocs was likely to produce weeks of political joking and uncertainty over the country's future leadership. Negotiations to form governments will start after a new parliament convenes on August 17th. Sanchez described Sunday's outcome as a defeat of the far-right. Spain and all its citizens who voted have been absolutely clear, he told the jubilant crowd gathered at the Socialist headquarters in Madrid. The backwards-looking bloc that wanted to roll back all the progress we made over the past 4 years has failed. Spain's Socialist leader and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez applauds during the general election in Madrid, Spain, July 23, 2023. Spain's Socialist leader, Pedro Sanchez Right, and his allies described Sunday's outcome as a victory. Sanchez had called the snap polls in late May after his Socialist Party and his far-left junior coalition partners suffered a drubbing in local and regional elections in which the right surged. He focused his campaign on warning about the danger of a PP-Vox government to mobilize the electorate. The strategy appears to have paid off, with turnout reaching almost 70%, some 3.5 percentage points higher than in 2019. Still on the news, at least 9 people have been killed in a plane crash in Sudan's coastal port city of Port Sudan. A civilian Antonov plane today crashed at Port Sudan Airport as a result of the technical failure, leading to the deaths of 9 people, including 4 military personnel. 1 child survived the crash, Sudanese army said in a statement. The crash on Sunday came 100 days after fighting in Sudan broke out on April 15th between the army and the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group in the capital, Khartoum, and states in western Sudan. Port Sudan, in the Red Sea state located on the eastern coast of the country, is one of the cities that have been under the control of the Sudanese army since the war began. Port Sudan Airport is the only one still working in the country, making the city a vital transit point for much-needed foreign aid. The war has left at least 3,000 dead across Sudan, according to a conservative estimate. More Story says Italy hosts conference to tackle migration. A one-day conference in Rome gathered Sunday, July 23rd, representatives of some 20 nations, European Union officials and international organizations. Italy's Premier, Giorgia Meloni, conveyed the summit to make her country a leader in resolving issues impacting Mediterranean nations such as energy, as Europe looks to Africa and the Middle East to permanently replace Russian supplies and illegal migration. African representatives attending the event included Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Tunisia's President Kais Saied, Nigerian Prime Minister Ahmadou Mohamedou, and Egypt Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli. Human rights groups see the meeting, which includes nations from both northern and sub-Saharan Africa as well as the Middle East, as creating a future roadmap, and worry it will amount to anti-migrant policies that put the onus in Africa to keep Africans out of Europe. Meloni told the opening meeting that Western arrogance had likely stood in the way of resolutions to the migrant issue. She proposed 4 main prongs for future cooperation: fighting criminal organizations, trafficking migrants, better managing flows of migrants, supporting refugees, and helping countries of origin. The West too often has given the impression of being more interested in giving lessons rather than lending a hand. Meloni said, "It is probably this difference that has made it difficult to make progress and solutions." She said if flows were better managed, there would be more room for legal migration. In her closing press conference, Meloni emphasized that there were no legal means of entry for many people who might have a case for refugee status because quotas are filled by those who arrive illegally. Conflict in Sudan reaches 100 days. The brutal war in Sudan between the army and a powerful paramilitary group has reached the grim milestone of 100 days with no signs of breather. On April 15th, a power tussle between Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his former deputy, Rapid Support Forces RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Hamedati Dagalo, burst into an all-out conflict, killing thousands of people, forcing millions from their homes and exacerbating an acute humanitarian crisis. On April 15th, heavy gunfire and explosions rocked the capital, Khartoum, sparking panic in the city and beyond. The army and the RSF each accused the other of attacking first. The clashes come after years of instability and repeated coups. Fighting also erupts in the western region of Darfur, which is still reeling from a brutal war that started in 2003 under long-time ruler Omar al-Bashir. In April 22nd, evacuations began. Several countries rushed to evacuate their nationals by air or land. Thousands flee in the exodus, while many embassies are ransacked. Millions of Sudanese remain trapped in their homes with supplies of water, food, medicines, and other basic items running low. On April 25th, failed truce, the United States and Saudi Arabia negotiated a 72-hour truce, but is quickly violated. A series of further truce deals that follow falter. Ahmed Harun, a leading figure in the government of al-Bashir, who was removed by the army in the wake of months-long popular protests, says he has escaped from prison. The army says that al-Bashir, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court ICC on genocide charges over the war in Darfur, was transferred to a hospital before the fighting started. On April 26th, aid agencies struggled, raised alarm as humanitarian efforts are interrupted across the country. Organizations struggle to resume operations while ensuring the safety of their workers. On April 27, ceasefire violated. The Sudanese army and the RSF agreed to extend the faltering ceasefire for an additional 72 hours amidst continuing violence in Khartoum and the western Darfur region. But fighting continues as warplanes patrol over the capital's northern suburbs and fighters on the ground exchange artillery and heavy machine gun fire, according to witnesses. More stories will come just in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining us, it's Global News on Zoom on Nigeria. And we begin with 4 days to deadline. Nigerians await ministerial list. Roughly 4 days to the expiration of the 60-day provision for the President Tinubu to submit names of ministerial nominees to the Senate for screening and confirmation, President Bola Tinubu is yet to fulfill this constitutional provision. Remember that President Tinubu took the oath of office on May 29th, when former President Muhammadu Buhari handed over the mantle of leadership to him. Multiple sources in the Senate said weekend that the upper legislative chamber is yet to receive the final list of the ministerial nominees. Sources at the presidency had last week hinted that the list was ready, but that a few adjustments were being made by the president. One of the sources revealed that 4 names initially penciled down by the president in 4 states have been withdrawn and replaced with new names. Another source also disclosed that the final list was supposed to be submitted to the Senate last week for the opposition against the immediate past governor of Kano State, Abdullahi Ganduje, who is said to be the president's preferred candidate to replace Senator Abdullahi Adamu as national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, APC. Ganduje was gathered was initially considered for a ministerial slot, but the resignation of Senator Adamu, which was said to have propelled the president to nominate him as possible replacement for the former chairman, being from the Northwest, where Adamu hails from. This is said to be generating crisis, as some stalwarts of the APC have argued that the former governor of Nasarawa State, Senator Tanko Almakura, who is from the North Central as the former chairman, was more cool-headed than Ganduje. Senator Almakura was one of the leading aspirants for the position during the last APC convention, but was prevailed upon by the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, to step down for the Senator Adamu. The former Nasarawa State governor at the time was accused of being Asiwaju Bola Tinubu's ally, who was then one of APC's presidential aspirants, but sources familiar with the intrigue playing out in the choice of the APC chairman hinted that the opposition to Ganduje's choice is responsible for the inability of the president to submit the ministerial list to the Senate last week. Although it was speculated that the ministerial list was forwarded to the Red Chamber last week, a highly placed source were responding said, "We are yet to get the final list of the ministerial nominees. If we have received it, the clerk of the National Assembly will have read it out. There will be no need to keep the list if it is received," he said. Another source said, according to report, that as of Friday, the president was still editing the list and will submit the final list this week. And finally, on the news on hashtag NSAS, Lagos plans mass burial for 103 bodies. The Lagos State government has approved the mass burial of 103 corpses recovered in the aftermath of the mass protest that hit the state in October 2020, where youth sought the disbandment of the defunct Special Anti-Robbery Squad. The State Ministry of Health confirmed this in a statement signed by its permanent secretary, Dr. Olusegun Oboye, according to reports from Boyega Oketile, the chief press secretary to Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, on Sunday. The statement was in reaction to an earlier leaked letter over the weekend from the Lagos State Public Procurement Agency dated July 19, 2023, addressed to the Ministry of Health and signed by the Director General of the agency, Mr. Onofo Wote Idowu. The letter revealed the approval of the sum of 61,285,000 for the mass burial. The permanent secretary added that there was also a jailbreak at Ikoyi prison, saying that the 103 casualties mentioned in documents were from this incident and not from Lekki toll gate as alleged. For the avoidance of doubt, nobody was retrieved from the Lekki toll gate incident, he added. He said, contrary to the narrative weaved around the recently approved mass burial, the hashtag NSAS panel subpoenaed the Lagos State chief pathologist to produce full records of unclaimed bodies of dead deposited with the state central morgue during the days immediately preceding the following the event at Lekki toll gate on October 20th, 2020. He added that the list with their autopsies of provable cause and circumstances of death was duly submitted and testified to before the panel. This subpoena was at the request of lawyers who represented hashtag NSAS protesters, and the chief pathologist complied. There was not a single finding in the report and ensuing white paper attributing the death of any named citizen listed in the autopsy to the Lekki incident. He said, following the announcement that relatives of persons who lost loved ones or whose relatives were declared missing between October 19th and 27, 2020, from various clashes as mentioned above, to contact the Department of Pathology and Forensic Medicine of the LASUT, it's important to state categorically that nobody responded to claim any of the bodies. However, after almost 3 years, the bodies remain unclaimed, adding to the congestion of the morgues. This spurred the need to decongest the morgues, a procedure that follows very careful medical and legal guidelines in the event that a relative may still turn up to claim a lost relative after a year of the incident. According to reports, the Lagos government in November 2021 released its white paper on the report by the NSAS panel that probed the Lekki toll gate incident of October 20th, 2020. The Babajide Sanwo-Olu government faulted the panel's report that 9 persons were killed at the toll gate when soldiers stormed the protest ground to disperse the protesters. In the white paper, the government described the claim of the panel that 9 persons were shot dead as assumptions and speculations. The Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry on Restitution for Victims of SARS-related abuses and other matters had on November 15, 2021, submitted its report, after which Sanwo-Olu set up the white paper committee. The 4-member committee was led by the State Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Mr. Moyoshori Onibanjo-san. A recap of major stories says emergency in Israel over judicial overhaul. 15 feared dead after ferry sunk in Indonesia. Russia says Ukrainian drone attack thwarted. Anxiety in Spain over election result. In Port Sudan crash, at least 9 dead. That's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.